I just forgot to start.
All right. Good evening, producer Susan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jersey Joe. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Fall gets here tomorrow. Has fall gotten to your neck of the woods yet?
It certainly doesn't feel like it. It is hazy, hot, and humid.
Because tomorrow we're going to have showers tomorrow, and then Friday it's going to be 70, dry and sunny. So finally,
I hope so.
so it's been a long time coming. My favorite time of the year.
Mine
All
too.
right. You want to hear what we're going to try to talk about today?
What's on the agenda?
All right. You ever heard of a guy named Aldous Huxley?
No, I don't believe I have.
He was a British author. He's dead now. He wrote a book called The Brave New World.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, and I have a quote from Aldous Huxley on how his view on how intelligent the average person is. Not very flattering, by the way. We'll share with you some highlights of President Biden's 2024 budget proposal, which we talked about very briefly
Mhm.
last week, and how much his proposed budget would add to the national debt over the next 10 years. In our stupidest thing I've heard all week, um, story, we'll tell you about how the Biden administration is planning on spending an average of $53,000 per home to bring high-speed internet service to some homes on Indian reservations, and many of those homes have a value of less than $50,000. So can you believe they're going to spend $53,000 to bring internet service to a home that's worth less than $50,000?
Yeah.
So in a related story, um, well, actually, the Biden's budget is kind of the related story because that's part of the reason the our budget deficit next year is going to be $2 trillion. In our hypocrisy, we have a new segment called Hypocrisy on Display, and we'll tell you about which teachers union president is sending her child to a private Catholic school instead of the public schools in this school district where she lives. And by the way, the last time I looked, Catholic schools didn't employ union teachers.
No.
Anyway, um, by the way, my next one, I was tempted to put this in the stupidest thing I've heard all week category, but it's it stands on. It's how the governor in Mexico is using fake statistics in an effort to suspend people's Second Amendment rights in one city in the state of New Mexico, in which public officials are refusing to enforce her new executive order. That's been a development today, by the way, because she did that on Friday. It was the whole thing over the weekend. And today, a bunch of public officials come out and basically said, screw you, governor, we're not going to enforce your executive order. By the way, has that made the local news out where you live?
No.
Okay, it's been a big story nationally. Um, and I guarantee you haven't seen this on the local news because this is the type of story the media doesn't cover. We'll tell you about some new all-time record highs for illegal border crossings over the past 60 days. And I guarantee you the media will never tell you when we set a new record for the number of illegal immigrants crossing into the United States, setting a new record. They don't think that's newsworthy. You've heard about the escaped prisoner down in the Philadelphia area. He's been on the loose for over
Yeah,
a
I'd
week
like
now.
to know where he's at, because
Well,
I would think after 13 days he could have made himself,
well,
pretty
they
far
keep
from
catching him. They
Philadelphia.
keep catching him on doorbell cams and trail
Yeah.
cams.
So why
Um,
can't they catch this guy then?
I don't know, but we'll tell you why uh, his continued escape is spurring gun sales in that area, and how he is now armed. By the way, it's reported that he has now become in possession of a gun. We'll tell you how that happened.
Yep.
Now that the days are getting shorter, we'll tell you why you need to check the ingredients on your daily multivitamin, and why, if you aren't taking a multivitamin, you should start taking one if you haven't already. And finally, our taxpayer relief shot segment comes to us from Antioch, Tennessee, where the manager of a gas station shoots and kills a thug who shot and wounded one of his employees. Do you think we can fit that all in today?
I'm sure you're going to do a really good job of that.
All right. Quote of the week: Aldous Huxley. He died probably back in the late 60s. He was a English. He's a British author. He wrote the book Brave New World, which is a classic. Now, we've all seen the clips of Jay Leno doing this jaywalking thing, and we've seen
Yeah.
the campus reform people. We've done several of these on this podcast, right? Where people can't answer basic questions like how many dimes are there in a dollar, and can you
Yep.
name two other countries beside the United States? Yeah, we know those,
Yeah.
right? All
Yep.
right. And I love the one, what country is Utah in? Remember
Yeah.
that one the woman couldn't tell what country is Utah in? Anyway, so those videos seem to validate this observation by him, which is now over 60 years old. And here's his observation. He said, the greater part of the population is not very intelligent. They dread responsibility and desire nothing better than to be told what to do.
Mhm.
Provided the rulers do not interfere with their material comforts and their cherished beliefs, they are perfectly happy to let themselves be ruled. What do you think of that? Any opinion?
Yeah, no, I agree. And if anybody read Brave New World in high school, that's also goes along to the dangers of giving control over
Yeah.
a lot of his premonitions are coming true.
Oh, and so you did read Brave New World.
Oh, in high school, isn't that like mandatory high school
Yeah.
reading?
Okay. I was when I went to school. I didn't know if you did. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, so
So
it's a
I
rather
went to one of those Catholic schools that had extensive reading lists.
okay. Anyway, so it's a rather discouraging and disparaging assessment of the human race today. But and it's clearly it's not about everybody. It's not about people like you and me,
Mhm.
or people who are politically aware. But unfortunately, there are. I hate to say it. I think what he said is maybe true of
Yeah.
half the population. What would be your guess?
Yeah, I'd say that's fair. And I also think that if you haven't read books like Brave New World or George Orwell, 1984, that you need to read these books. I mean, they're novels,
Right.
but fictional novels, but boy, are they couldn't be more true.
Yeah, they're almost like what's the word I'm looking for? Not predictive, but what's the word I'm looking for?
They're like premonitions almost,
Foretelling.
foretelling of the
Yeah,
future. Yeah.
foretelling. All right, so I'm going to read this quote just one more time, just for those who missed it and didn't have the context. So here was his quote. The greater part of the population is not very intelligent. They dread responsibility and they desire nothing better than to be told what to do. Provided the rulers do not interfere with their material comforts and their cherished beliefs, they are perfectly happy to let themselves be ruled. And unfortunately, I think that applies to, in my opinion, at least half the population of the United States.
And I think that also goes to this world of this divide between capitalism and
And
socialism. It
social, yeah, absolutely.
speaks to
Socialism.
socialism.
Yep.
The
Just,
capitalism encourages people to think out of the box and strive to be better. Where
and
socialism is,
take risks and by the way, here's a statistic. I don't know if I've ever talked about this before. There was a list I read a couple of years ago, and the list was the 100 greatest inventions of the 20th century, which was the 1900s, from 1900 to 1999. And it was the 100 greatest inventions. And on that list, 99 of the top 100 were all invented or developed in capitalist countries. Do you know the one invention out of the 100 that was developed in a socialist or communist country?
wasn't it the rifle?
The AK-47
Yeah.
rifle. Now, remember, the list wasn't most beneficial. It was most important. In other words, it had the most influence. And the AK-47 is the most widely produced gun in the world. There are literally, the gun has been produced in over 60 countries, hundreds of millions produced. It's been the weapon of choice in all these African revolutions and, the Che Guevara, Nicaragua, Cuba. So the AK-47 has been an important invention in terms of bringing about political and social change.
Mhm.
But everything else you look at, whether it be the wheat combine, the railroad, medicine. By the way, even the nuclear bomb was on the list because the nuclear bomb, obviously developed by the United States. But the airplane, television, radio, every important invention you can name, the automobile, was developed in a capitalist country. And why do you think? Oh, and by the way, air conditioning, Willis Carrier. And so why do you think that was? By Apple computers. And actually, rather than put you on the spot, I'll tell you why. In my opinion, the reason by the way, Obama used to derisively talk about people who won life's lottery. life's lottery winners. He used to refer to them derisively, people who became billionaires. Well, I look at it this way: guys like Joes and Wozniak, they gambled everything they had. They maxed out their credit cards. They worked till midnight in Job's garage building the first Apple computer. How many people would gamble their money and their time like that if it wasn't for the opportunity to hit the jackpot?
Yeah.
Willis Carrier, if you read the history of Willis Carrier, which I have done, he's called the father of air conditioning. The guy went into debt. How he borrowed money, friends, family, mortgaged his house, and he worked for years, didn't have any income. He literally gambled everything he had on inventing and commercializing air conditioning. And why did he do it? Because of the opportunity to get rich. Well, if you're in a socialist country, let's say he was in Russia and he invented air conditioning in Russia, you know what he would get after he took that gamble?
Nothing.
He'd get a plaque.
Yeah.
He'd get a plaque and a ribbon. He'd get the Order of Lenin. But so who would take that sort of gamble if there's no opportunity? And by the way, for every success we hear about, you've got 100 failures. But the point is, it's the opportunity to strike it rich that causes people to take those types of gambles. And the opportunity only exists in a capitalist country, in a capitalist economy, rather. So, so before I move on to Biden's budget, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I'm going to add one more book to our reading list here. Fahrenheit 451, Ray Bradbury. That's another one
Ray Bradbury. Yep.
That is coming to fruition.
Yes, and by the way, Fahrenheit, for those who don't know, Fahrenheit 451 is the temperature at which paper ignites and you can burn a book.
Yeah, but that's another book that is it was written, I don't know, back in the 50s. Yeah. And boy, it just hits home in today's society.
My goodness, you are well read. All right.
It's that Catholic school education.
By the way, next week we'll talk about, we may do a list of, I think 20 books every kid should read before he gets out of high school. We'll maybe do that next week. All right.
And the irony, by the way, in a lot of schools, you got to read Fahrenheit 451 if you haven't read so. But the irony is that book is actually banned in a lot of schools.
Being banned.
Which just talks to the irony of the book.
Oh my God. A book about burning books is banned. Okay. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about President Biden's budget proposal. So every year, the President of the United States has to submit a budget to Congress. He tells Congress, this is my budget proposal. And of course, then Congress comes back and says, well, this is our budget proposal. Well, President Biden's budget proposal for 2024, which starts on October 1, which is in 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. First of all, that budget shows the annual budget deficit growing from 1.6 trillion this year to over 2 trillion. I think it's 2.1 trillion next year. But going beyond that, whenever a president does a budget, he's required to also project forward. And based upon the programs that I'm proposing we enact or continue to fund, next year, if we continue to fund those programs over the next 10 years, he's required to forecast the 10-year impact of all those programs. And I think I mentioned this, I gave this number away last week. And he is projecting that if Congress approves everything he has proposed in his 2024 budget and those programs continue for 10 years starting next year, they will add in 2023 dollars $17.1 trillion to our current national debt of 32 trillion, which so you add 17 to 32, and last time I looked, that's 49, right? But remember, that 17 trillion is in 2023 dollars. So if you just tack on 2 or 3% inflation per year to those dollars, if Congress gives him what he wants, or God forbid they give him more than he wants, in 10 years, our national debt will be over $50 trillion. Now, how reasonable is that 17 trillion? Well, let me give you an example of why I think that's conservative dreaming. It'll probably be way beyond that. Just 1 year ago in his 2023 budget proposal, he had put that same 10-year increase in the national debt at just 14.4 trillion. Well, here it is 12 months later. He says, I know I told you last year we were going to add 14.4 trillion, but now it's not going to be 14.4. I think it's going to be 17.1. Well, that is a 18% increase in the projected national debt, increase in national debt in just 12 months. So by the way, if people worked for me, gave me a forecast a year ago and they were off by 18%, they probably wouldn't be working for me anymore. But here's a question. So a year ago, he said the increase in the national debt over 10 years will be 14.4 trillion. This year, he's saying it's going to be 17.1. What happened between his last budget proposal in 2022, and his new budget proposal? There was one piece of legislation that passed. Remember what that legislation was?
I don't remember.
How about the Inflation Reduction Act?
Oh, yes, you talked about
that. So remember, when he did his 2023 budget proposal in 2022, the IRA had not yet passed. So now we've passed the IRA, and instead of bringing down inflation and bringing down the deficits, it has jacked up the deficits. So I'm not going to drag this on, but folks, if you want to dig into this, just Google Biden's 2024 budget proposal, and it's stunning that they pass a bill called the Inflation Reduction Act, and it adds $3 trillion to the national debt over 10 years. I'm just shaking my head in disbelief. And of course, you won't hear that on the news either, right? Mm-hmm. All right.
Your tax dollars at work, people.
Your tax dollars at work. All right. You want to get onto the stupidest thing I heard all week?
What is the stupidest thing you've heard all week?
All right. So the Biden administration has announced a proposal to bring fiber optic based high-speed internet to Indian reservations and other rural homes. And this is from the Wall Street Journal. It turns out that the average cost, now, by the way, burying fiber optic cable is not cheap. It turns out that on average, they're going to be spending $53,000 per home to bring fiber optic cable-based high-speed internet to all these homes in Indian reservations and other rural areas. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't work to make sure that they have good internet access, but as an alternative, have you heard of the Starlink dish network?
Yes, that's Elon Musk.
Right. He's got 3,600. We've talked about this before. He's got over 3,000 beach ball sized satellites in orbit around the United States, and they provide high-speed internet service. Do you know you can go to Best Buy or Home Depot and buy the entire Starlink kit for $599?
No, I didn't know that.
$599 you can do, and for $120 per month, and this is if you're one at a time, $120 a month, you can sign up for Starlink internet service, and on average you get about 100 megabits per second. I get those two confused, but it's 100 MBS per second. All right, 100 MBS,
which isn't terrible for just reading and scrolling the internet and emails.
Well, you can even download a movie. I remember when I was in Colorado, I had cellular, and I only had 25. I could still download a movie at 25. And by the way, and that's on average. It could go as high as 250. In fact, in the middle of the night, if you want to download a movie, you get 250 megabytes per second. Mm-hmm. But here's the point. Our current interest rate, when the U.S. Treasury is borrowing money, which they have to do to fund programs like this, we're currently paying about a 4.5% interest rate on borrowed money. Well, if you apply that 4.5% to $53,000 per home, you come up with about $2,700 per year in interest cost alone. And so, by the way, I'm sure. So, first of all, if you bought all those homes a $600 Starlink dish package, and then went to Elon Musk and said, "Hey, I know you want $120 a month to sign up an individual home, but what if we offered you 5,000 homes as a package deal?" You think Elon Musk would cut a deal less than $120? He would,
absolutely.
And but even if he didn't, it would still be cheaper for the U.S. government to prepay. Even at the $120 a month, it would still be cheaper for the U.S. government to prepay their satellite subscription for the next 20 years than to spend $53,000 of borrowed money. So I can't think of anything more stupid than spending $53,000 to bring fiber optic internet cable to Indian reservations. Do you have any thoughts or opinions on that?
So, and I think this was more eye-opening when at the start of the pandemic, when children were being forced to homeschool. There's whether you live in the city or whether you live out in the middle of absolute nowhere, which is a lot of where these Indian reservations are. A lot of people couldn't afford internet service for their children to
Right.
get that education. And there is now the affordable connectivity program for low-income families that, especially if you live in the city, you can apply and then you can get your free internet service so that your children can homeschool. But in places like many of these Indian reservations or out in the middle of nowhere, that's not an option because, like you said, they don't have the infrastructure to run the wires out there. And that's where these Starlink satellites might be beneficial. But
Right.
I don't think
And
it
the
needs
other
to be this global. I think we need to look at who needs this internet
right.
service
And the
and
other
provide
option,
it to
by the
those
way,
people.
with 5G, I think I get 40 megabytes per second with 5G on my phone. So just put up some cell tower. By the way, it's pretty flat. It's not like there's a lot of mountainous terrain. So you've got Starlink, satellite is one option, and 5G line of sight cell towers is another one. So there's so many more cost-effective ways to do this. I'm just shaking my head at $53,000 per home, and that's an average. They said on some of the homes it'd be high. It would be as high as $300,000 per home. I got to tell you, if there was a home where it was going to cost me $300,000, I would buy their. I would build them a new house, and I would burn down their own house, and I would say, "Here's a brand new house, closer to town, and it's a brand new house, and here's $50,000." I just cannot conceive of spending $300,000 to bring fiber optic internet to some house out in the middle of nowhere. Can you?
Yeah, these people definitely need to have access to internet, but there has to be a more economical way to get it to them.
And there is. And again, you don't need 500 megabytes per second. Again, you can download a movie at 25 MBS.
I don't have 5 megabytes per second.
So no. All right. All right. You want to move on to hypocrisy?
What is hypocrisy for today?
All right. Well, in Chicago, well, if you weren't sure what it looks like, here's a collected example. In Chicago, the president of the Chicago Teachers Union, the CTU, a gal named of Stacy Davis-Gates, sends her son to an elite private Catholic school that does not employ union teachers, despite having voiced her opposition to school choice policies in the past. So can you imagine? You represent the teachers union in Chicago. You have voiced your opposition to school choice policies, and yet you are quietly sending your own son to a private Catholic school that doesn't employ union teachers.
That is hypocrisy.
Right. And by the way, it doesn't say much about her faith in the Chicago school system, does it?
No, not at all.
No. All right. How are we doing on time?
Oh, we are, you got about 10, 15 minutes.
All right. So you didn't hear about the whole New Mexico gun ban thing?
Yeah, I did hear that actually.
Okay. Well, for those who didn't, on Friday, the governor of New Mexico announced that she was declaring a, quote, gun violence health emergency for the city of Albuquerque and the rest of the surrounding county, which is called Bernalillo County. She claimed that under her declared emergency, she could prohibit the carrying of legally licensed concealed weapons in that city and county by licensed concealed weapon carry permit holders. She quoted some fake statistics on alleged pediatric gun deaths as justification for her illogical and unconstitutional executive order. And I said illogical, but why illogical? Because, and first of all, back up. Yes, there has been a spate of street shootings in Albuquerque, very dangerous city, violent city. Some 11-year-old and 13-year-old kids have been killed. But why is this illogical? Because not a single one of those illegal shootings that have taken place in the city of Albuquerque in the past decade has been committed by a licensed concealed weapon carry permit holder. So how will denying those individuals the ability to protect themselves against acts of violent crime reduce violent crime in that city? And why does she believe that those violent criminals who are already ignoring all existing gun laws and laws against violent crime will pay any attention to her new executive order. Can you explain that to me?
No, not at all. And in fact, I would want those people to have those guns. And in the case that we always talk about every week, a good guy with a gun or a good woman with a gun,
right?
That if they do encounter a situation, that they can hopefully prevent it or stop it.
Right, and we've had several where, a bystander, a good guy with a gun, sees somebody attacking some woman and shoots the bad guy. But to say, but again, she has the data, and the data says no concealed, none of these crimes none of these shootings have been committed by anybody with a concealed weapons permit. So what is the logic in saying, all you people who have been following the law, you can't carry your gun in the city of Albuquerque anymore? And she bases this, by the way, and her rationale is, well, because we've had she calls it pediatric gun deaths are becoming an epidemic. And her claim was that, quote, gun violence is the leading cause of death among children. And that is bogus for two reasons. And I actually have the study that she based the claim on. First of all, half of those gun deaths, what she calls gun violence, are acts of suicide. So let me ask you a question. If you decide to commit suicide and you hang yourself, is that an act of rope violence?
No.
If you decide to commit suicide and do so by a pill overdose, is that an act of pill violence?
No.
So if you decide to commit suicide and use a gun, is that an act of gun violence?
No.
No, because violence is something done to somebody by another person. So saying that a suicide is an act of gun violence is as stupid as saying that, hanging is an act of rope violence. So number one, half of the statistics she was quoting as gun violence were suicide. The second, the study that she based her claim on, I have the study, included their definition of a child was people up to and including the age of 19, which means that if you are 19 years old, 19 years, 11 months, and 364 days, and you died, your death was included as a child, which means that if you were a 19-year-old felon gangbanger 2 days shy of your 20th birthday, and you get killed in a shootout by a rival gangbanger, your death would be included among those child gun death statistics. And the last time I looked, if you were old enough to vote, join the military without your parents' consent, buy a car, or be sentenced to a penitentiary for your crimes, you were no longer a child. Are you?
No, not once you're 18. You can join the military, you can vote, you can go to prison for felony.
Right. So to say these are pediatric, can you think of anything more deceptive and dishonest saying pediatric gun, saying a 19-year-old gangbanger felon who gets killed in a shootout?
And sadly, we, especially in some of the bigger cities, we're seeing a lot of 12, 13, 14-year-old gang members that are dying.
Yes, right. And to her point, okay, well, 12 and 13-year-old kids, again, whether they had a gun or not, they were still 12 and 13 and got shot. But again, if you're a 19-year-old convicted felon and you get killed in a shootout, your death is hardly, to classify your death as a pediatric gun death is about as dishonest, as misleading as you can get. But that's why language matters. So anyway, here's an update to that story. Today, both the sheriff for Bernalillo County, which is where Albuquerque is located, and the district attorney for the city of Albuquerque, who, by the way, was appointed to that position by the same governor, have said that they will not enforce her executive order. And this is a quote from the district attorney. And here is his quote. As an officer of the court, I cannot and will not enforce something that is clearly unconstitutional, said Bregman, the district attorney. This office will continue to focus on criminals of any age that use guns in the commission of a crime. Well, good for him. Any thoughts?
Yeah, no, good for him to stand up for them.
And the sheriff too. And the sheriff said, I will not, the sheriff also said, I believe this is unconstitutional.
It's unconstitutional. It's their Second Amendment right.
Right. And as both the sheriff and the district attorney both took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of New Mexico, and they both believe that that enforcing that order would be a violation of their oaths of office. So good for them. All right. Surge and illegal border crossings. I'm going to have to rush through some of this. Under Trump, we were averaging 2,500, 3,000 legal crossings a month in this country. Over the last 2 months, you know what that number has risen to?
5,000.
Oh, keep going. You're not even close.
10,000.
Closer. How about 11,000 per month?
Yikes.
So that, that's a quadrupling of where it was. Okay? It's like 11.5. So we're up to almost 12,000 border crossings a month. And I think last week or the week before, we talked about how they welded open the gates and the fence in Arizona. Yeah.
Well, and there was one, I don't know if it was the same one, about the water, to let the water go, but water can go through anyway. So
the water can go through anyway. So that, so the logic why they had to weld those goats up. And I mean, the steel beams are spaced 10 inches apart. The water can go through the steel beams that are 10 inches apart. So
a small
anyway,
child could still fit through 10 inches.
Yeah, a little, maybe a 2-year-old, but the parents aren't going to get through.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's we're up to 11,000 a month of legal immigration on the southern border. All right. So we talked briefly about the Pennsylvania. So this guy escaped 11 days ago.
Yeah.
Last week, after he'd been on the run for 5 days and he's spotted on all these doorbell cams, local gun stores started reporting people coming in buying guns for the first time. And by the way, those people who came in to buy guns for the first time, they were probably relieved to find that Pennsylvania doesn't have one of these 3-day or 7-day enforced waiting periods. Don't you think? Can you imagine if you were afraid that this guy's going to break into your house in the middle of the night and you can't have a gun for 7 days? So, anyway, because those first-time gun buyers were buying guns, the first is that apparently some of those new gun buyers no longer believe the myth that the police can protect them from harm at the hands of evil and dangerous people. Now, since it's been 10 days, this guy is apparently
13 days.
I'm sorry?
13.
13. He now has a rifle. He's been seen with a rifle. Yep. And so how did he get that gun? Did he buy it from a gun dealer after passing a background check?
He broke into someone's house and stole it.
So he didn't pass a background check? He didn't buy it at a gun show?
Nope.
He stole a gun. Which happens, by the way, 250,000 times per year in this country, roughly. About 85 to 90 guns per day are stolen from homes and cars in this country, typically by burglars who break into homes when nobody's home, steal the guns, and quickly sell them for drug money. So he got his gun the same way everybody else does. They're stolen. Anyway. All right, let's talk about multivitamins real quick. So what is one of the vitamins that's essential to good health and warding off sickness?
Vitamin D.
Vitamin D. And what is the only natural source of vitamin D?
The sun.
The sunlight, right. Your skin produces vitamin D when it absorbs sunlight. Well, now that the days are getting shorter, anybody who is not taking a multivitamin with vitamin D will become vitamin D deficient. And by the way, these statistics, if you look at the statistics, more than 90% of the people who died from COVID were found to be severely vitamin D deficient, and the balance and almost all the others had some sort of comorbidity. So vitamin D deficiency is the determining factor whether or not you would succumb to a COVID infection. So if you're not taking a multivitamin, take one. But here's the other thing, even if you are, I found out that a great number of multivitamins don't have vitamin D or only have a minimal amount of vitamin D. You want to have at least 800 micrograms, if not 1,000 micrograms of vitamin D daily. So if you're not taking a vitamin D that has at least 800 units of vitamin D in it, please do one, because it will save you from not only getting COVID, it'll help ward off flu and everything else. So
I kind of feel like I'm jinxing myself when I say this, but as COVID cases, there's been a slight increase, I think, as kids are going back to school and stuff, and kids going back to universities. There's been a slight increase in COVID cases recently. And again, I feel like I jinx myself for saying this, but I have not had COVID ever.
You take a multivitamin?
And not only do I take a multivitamin, but I do take an additional D supplement on top of that.
A vitamin D supplement, good for you. Well, I don't think you have a lot to worry about. All right, how much time we got?
Yeah, you have about 3 minutes.
All right, then we will skip. Actually, no, we won't skip. We'll play real quick. We'll play the Taxpayer Relief Chat intro. Here we go. Hang on. if I can find it.
Somebody's breaking in your house, you're more than welcome to shoot them in Santa Rosa County. We prefer that you do, actually. Hopefully you'll save the taxpayers money.
All right, and that was the sheriff of Santa Rosa County, Florida. So this one comes to Tennessee, where a customer comes into a gas station to use the air hose, and he gets into an argument with one of the attendants, and the guy pulls out a gun and shoots the attendant. Unfortunately for him, the manager of the gas station also had a gun. Here's what happens.
Shooting at an Antioch auto shop last night. A manager said he shot and killed a man in self-defense. Police said Larry Johnson Jr. started to put air in his tire when no one helped him. A worker took the hose away. The two got into a fight. The manager said Johnson grabbed a gun from his car and shot the worker in the hip and arm. The manager then shot Johnson, killing him. Moments after Johnson was shot, police say this man walked into the bay. He picked up Johnson's gun from the floor and ran off. Detectives are trying to figure out now, well, who is this person? They're trying to identify him.
So what do you think of that one?
Yeah, I feel like if you're a gas station owner or convenience store owner in this day and age, you have to have a gun behind the counter.
Right. All right. So I thought that was pretty good. So again, and remember, he shot the attendant twice. Didn't shoot him once. He shot him on the guy's on the ground. He shoots him a second time. So obviously this guy was out for no good. All right, we're running out of time. So anything you want to add?
No, I do hope they catch this guy. And I'm curious why he's staying in the Chester County area, which is a suburb of Philadelphia.
Well, I kind of got him. He did steal a car, but he had to abandon it because it ran out. He stole the van and drove it about 15 miles and it ran out of gas. And of course, he's got no money, no credit card. So he's kind of on foot. So he really can't get away. Anyway, folks, that's the Jerzee Joe podcast for today. If you want to go to the website, it's just go to jerzeejoe.com, and that's J-E-R as in Robert, Z as in zebra, double E, Jerzee, jerzeejoe.com. If you want to send me a suggestion or question, or it's just joe at jerzeejoe.com. And other than that, I'm done. Producer Susan, unless you have something you'd like to add.
No, I'm just looking forward to fall. I wish it would hurry up and get here.
Well, hopefully next weekend it'll be nice and cool and the leaves will start to turn. All right. Talk to you then.
All right.
Bye-bye.